Elijah Marin was 18 when the rain took him. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a slick road, a sharp curve, a moment that came unexpectedly. By the time the car stopped spinning, his body was still breathing, but the damage had already been done. At the hospital, Camille sat beside his bed while machines worked harder than his body ever would again. The doctors spoke in careful sentences, avoiding her eyes. They said his brain had gone quiet. They said he wouldn't wake up. They said 4 months was generous. Camille heard all of it. She simply refused to accept any of it as final. Camille had Elijah young, too young to know how empty a house could feel after people leave. When her husband walked away years later, Elijah became more than her son. He became proof that she hadn't failed, that her life still had purpose. So when the doctors stopped talking about recovery, Camille didn't cry. She listened. And when medicine ran out of answers, she went looking for another kind. She followed whispers, spoken quietly between grief and desperation. The shop didn't advertise. It existed the way secrets do between places, easy to miss unless you were already desperate. The woman inside didn't ask Camille to sit. She didn't offer comfort or sympathy. She asked one question: how much are you willing to lose? Camille answered without hesitation. The woman told her what was required: money and a doll, one that looked exactly like her son. The ritual was performed beside Elijah's hospital bed. Candles burned where machines once stood. Strange words filled the room, spoken softly and carefully. Camille held her son's hand while the woman whispered over the doll. When Elijah's heart finally stopped, Camille screamed. The woman did not react. She placed the doll upright and smiled. "He's not gone," she said. "He's moved." That night, Camille carried the doll home and placed it in Elijah's childhood bedroom. She told herself she had saved him. She didn't realize then what she had actually done. She hadn't preserved her son's life. She had ended it and begun something else entirely. Camille did not sleep that night. She sat in the chair across from the bed, the doll resting on the pillow where Elijah used to lie. Its face was calm, empty, the witch's words repeated in her mind. "He's not gone." But hours passed, and nothing happened. The house breathed around her, old woods and pipes shifting. Camille began to doubt. She told herself she had been foolish, that grief had made her reckless, that she had paid a stranger to perform a ritual that ended in nothing but shame. Just before dawn, she whispered his name. Elijah. The doll's head turned. Not fast, not sudden, just enough. Camille froze, her heart pounding so hard she felt dizzy. She told herself she was imagining it, that exhaustion had finally pushed her too far. Then the doll's mouth moved. "Mom?" The sound was wrong, not hollow, not distorted, soft, familiar. Camille fell to her knees. She reached for the doll, clutching it to her chest, crying as if it were flesh. She spoke his name over and over again. Elijah answered slowly, as if learning how to use a voice again. He asked where he was. He asked why everything felt heavy. He asked why he couldn't move. Camille told him he was sick. She told him the doctor said rest was necessary, that he would heal soon, that this was temporary. In that moment, the first lie was born. The witch returned days later. She did not react to the doll's voice. She had expected it. "There will be rules," she said calmly. Elijah could speak, he could think, but movement would come with limits. No mirrors, no visitors. No one else could see him move. He could never leave the house, and most importantly, his movement was limited. Camille nodded, listening only to the parts she wanted to hear. She paid again. The witch left. The rules remained. Camille covered the mirrors. She locked the doors. She dismissed the staff who asked too many questions. She arranged the house so that Elijah would never be seen by anyone else. At first, Elijah believed her. He trusted the explanations, trusted the promises, trusted that healing required patience. But days passed, then weeks, and nothing changed. Elijah's mind remained sharp, curious, growing. His body did not. He asked about school, friends, music he used to like. Camille changed the subject. She said the world outside was dangerous. She said he was safer inside. At night, when the house went quiet, Elijah tested his limits. He discovered that when no one was watching, he could move. Not much, a finger, his head, a small shift of weight, enough to remind him that he was still there. He learned the house by memory, the sound of footsteps, the rhythm of Camille's breathing as she slept nearby. He learned that mirrors were not covered to protect him. They were covered to hide him. And slowly, quietly, Elijah began to understand the truth. Time moved differently inside the house. There were no seasons Elijah could see, no clocks he was allowed to watch, no mirrors to show him what he had become. Days passed only because Camille said they did. At first, Elijah counted by her footsteps, by the way light shifted faintly through covered windows. But even that grew unreliable. Camille changed routines often, sometimes intentionally, sometimes because she forgot. And Elijah learned that when time is controlled by someone else, it stops belonging to you. Elijah's thoughts did not freeze with his body. He remembered books he had read as a boy and began to imagine new ones. He replayed conversations in his head until he could hear them clearly, then altered them just to feel change. He asked questions Camille wouldn't answer. Why he couldn't feel pain anymore. Why hunger never came. Why sleep didn't feel like rest. Camille grew uncomfortable. She reminded him to be patient, told him recovery took time, told him he was lucky to be alive. That word lucky began to rot inside him. Camille spoke of the outside world less and less. When Elijah asked about friends, she said they had moved on. When he asked about music, she said it wasn't important anymore. When he asked what year it was, she avoided the question entirely. Eventually he stopped asking, not because he didn't care, but because every answer felt like another door closing. Camille replaced truth with routine, morning greetings, evening reassurances, soft promises spoken like prayers. At night, when Camille slept, Elijah tested the edges of himself. He learned how far his new joints could bend, how much weight he could shift without making a sound. Lucia Monroe arrived on a quiet afternoon. She stepped out of the car with one suitcase and no expectations. The house loomed in front of her, old, carefully maintained, and strangely untouched by time. Lucia had answered the job listing without much thought. She needed the money, she needed the distraction, and she needed somewhere that didn't ask questions. Camille greeted her politely, almost warmly. She spoke in measured tones, her smile practiced but not unkind. The rules came immediately. No mirrors uncovered, no personal questions, no emotional attachment. Lucia nodded, assuming it was eccentricity. Still, something about the house unsettled her. It was too quiet, not peaceful. Lucia found the room on her first evening. Camille hadn't mentioned it. A childhood bedroom sealed off from the rest of the house, curtains drawn tight, mirrors covered completely. And in the center the doll. It sat upright, dressed carefully, hands folded as if posed. Lucia felt it immediately. The sense that the room was occupied. Not haunted, occupied, as if something was aware of her standing there. She didn't plan to speak. The words came out of her before she realized she was addressing it. A simple greeting, soft, almost embarrassed. The doll answered. Lucia didn't scream. She didn't run. She froze, her breath caught halfway between disbelief and shock. The voice wasn't monstrous. It was tired, confused. Lucia returned the next night, and the next. She spoke carefully at first, afraid that acknowledging him too much would make the situation real. Elijah listened. He asked questions she didn't know how to answer, about time, about people, about the outside world. Lucia realized quickly that he was not a child anymore. His mind had grown quietly, painfully, in isolation. And unlike Camille, Lucia did not lie. When she didn't know something, she said so. That honesty became a fracture Camille never noticed forming. Elijah began to wait for her. Lucia began to look forward to the room. The conversations deepened. Elijah's wit surfaced sharp, dry, unexpected. Sometimes he teased her. Sometimes he fell silent for long stretches, listening to her breathe. Lucia felt something unfamiliar stirring. Not pity, connection. And she understood with growing unease that Camille's rules weren't designed to protect Elijah. They were designed to keep anyone else from seeing him clearly. Lucia didn't mean to break any rules. She didn't plan to touch him. But the distance between them grew smaller every night. And some rules only exist until someone forgets why they were written. Lucia noticed it before she understood it. The space between her chair and the bed grew smaller each night. At first by accident, then by habit, and eventually by choice. She told herself it was practical, easier to hear him, easier to see his face in the low light. Elijah noticed, too. He didn't comment on it. He simply followed her movements with careful attention, as if afraid acknowledging it might make her retreat. Silence settled between them differently now. She looked at the hand resting motionless on the bed. It looked lifeless. She knew it wasn't. Lucia removed one glove slowly. The fabric made the softest sound as it slid free, loud enough to feel dangerous. Her bare hand hovered inches from Elijah's. She could still stop. She should have. Elijah said nothing. He waited. And in that waiting, Lucia felt the weight of 20 stolen years press against her chest. Her fingers touched him. It was warm. Not room temperature. Not imagined. Warm. Lucia inhaled sharply. Elijah gasped as sensation surged through him like a forgotten language. The warmth spread. His awareness sharpened painfully. He felt texture, pressure, presence. Something inside him stretched, desperate and fragile. Lucia didn't pull away. A sound echoed through the room. Soft. Wrong. Hairline fractures appeared beneath Lucia's fingertips, spreading across the porcelain surface like veins of light. The glow wasn't bright. It was internal, contained, as if something long compressed was finally pushing outward. Elijah felt it, a tearing sensation. Not pain, but release. The air thickened. Curtains shuddered though no wind touched them. Shadows bent along the walls, stretching toward the bed as if pulled by gravity. The house creaked. Lucia stepped back, heart pounding. Elijah felt himself shifting, not moving, separating. The spell that had held him intact for decades was unraveling, thread by fragile thread. The room should have torn itself apart. Instead, it went quiet, too quiet. Elijah felt himself stretching, not forward or outward, but away from the shell that had held him for decades. The doll split completely, fragments collapsing inward as if they had never been solid. Elijah fell, not down, but elsewhere. The doll emptied itself, leaving nothing behind but silence and broken light. The body had been prepared carefully, young, unmarked, identical. Camille had planned for this long before Lucia arrived. She called it mercy. She called it love. She never called it control. Elijah's soul slammed into flesh like breath forced back into lungs. His chest convulsed violently. Air burned as it rushed in. His heart seized, then began to beat. He screamed, not from pain, but from sensation. Cold, heat, weight, gravity, everything came at once. He was alive. Lucia reached him first, falling to her knees, hands shaking as she cradled his face, grounding him as his body struggled to remember how to exist. Elijah focused on Lucia's voice, her warmth, the steady pressure of her hands. It anchored him. For the first time since the accident, his tears were real. Camille stood frozen in the doorway, watching her son breathe without her, happy her son was back. Lucia helped Elijah sit up slowly, guiding him through each breath, each movement. His body trembled, unfamiliar and fragile, but undeniably real. Elijah learned that when Lucia stayed close, he felt complete. When she stepped away, the cold returned. Lucia noticed the way his hand lingered, the way his eyes followed her, the way rooms responded to her absence. She understood what she had become to him. Elijah stood behind her, too close. "Don't leave," he whispered. It wasn't a threat. It was a plea. It was a need. Lucia reached back and took his hand. Please like, share, and subscribe.